Run, you don't know what you're getting involved in. That's what she told him, bleeding, shaking, wearing the vest of the most feared motorcycle club in America. She begged him to leave. He was 20 years old. He had no weapon, no training, no connection to her world, and every single reason to walk away. But Ethan Walker knelt beside her in that dirt and said 5 words that changed everything. I'm not going anywhere, ma'am. What happened next brought thousands of Hell's Angels to his front door. If this story moves you, subscribe to my channel and follow this story to the very end. Drop a comment and tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The phone at Ray's Auto Repair rang 4 times before anyone picked it up. Ray's shop, Ethan Walker said, pressing the phone between his ear and his shoulder, while his hand stayed buried in the engine of a 2004 Ford F-150. Ethan, it's Mrs. Calloway. My car's making that sound again. The squealing sound. No, honey, the other one. The clunking. Ethan closed his eyes for a second. He'd fixed Mrs. Calloway's car 3 times in the last 2 months. Each time she'd paid late. Each time he'd told his uncle it was fine. Bring it in tomorrow morning, Mrs. Calloway. I'll take a look before we open. You're a good boy, Ethan. Your grandmother raised you right. He wiped his hands on a rag that was already so dirty it barely made a difference. Yes, ma'am, she did her best. When he hung up, his Uncle Ray was standing in the doorway of the small office, arms crossed, shaking his head. You keep fixing that woman's car for free, you're going to be the one who can't pay rent. She's 74, Uncle Ray. She drives that car to church and to the grocery store. That's it. And she drives it into the ground every single time. Ethan didn't argue. He never argued. That was the thing about Ethan Walker that most people in Silver Creek, Tennessee noticed first. Not his height, not his blonde hair, not the quiet way he carried himself. It was the fact that the boy simply did not fight back. Not with words, not with fists, not with attitude. Some people in town thought that made him weak. His grandmother, Martha Walker, knew better. She'd raised him since he was 4 years old after his parents died in a car accident on Route 29 during a rainstorm. She'd taken him in without hesitation, without complaint, and without a single dollar of help from anyone. She worked as a seamstress. She cleaned houses on weekends. She sold pies at the church fundraiser every fall. And every single night before Ethan went to bed, she told him the same thing. A good person doesn't walk away when someone is hurting. Ethan heard that sentence so many times growing up that it became part of him. Not like a rule, more like a reflex. The way some people flinch when they hear a loud noise, Ethan moved toward people who needed help. He couldn't stop himself. When he was 12, he pulled a younger kid out of the creek behind the elementary school after the boy slipped on the rocks. Ethan got a gash on his knee that needed 7 stitches. He never told his grandmother how it happened. When he was 16, he sat in the parking lot of the Walmart for 3 hours with an elderly man whose car battery had died, waiting for the man's daughter to drive up from Knoxville. Ethan missed his own shift at the grocery store that day. He got fired. He didn't complain. When he was 18, he found a stray dog on the side of the highway with a broken leg. He wrapped it in his jacket and drove 40 minutes to the nearest vet. The vet told him the surgery would cost $600. Ethan paid it. He ate rice and canned beans for 2 months afterward. That was who Ethan Walker was. Not a hero, not brave, not looking for anything. Just a young man who could not look at suffering and keep walking. And on the afternoon of October 14th, that instinct almost got him killed. It was a Tuesday. Ethan remembered that later because Tuesdays were the slowest days at the shop and Ray always let him leave early. He clocked out at 4:30, climbed into his old Chevy truck, and took the back road home through the forest. The route added 10 minutes to his drive, but Ethan liked it. The road was quiet, no traffic, no noise. Just trees and gravel and the sound of his engine. He was about 7 miles in when he heard it. A scream. Not a shout, not someone calling for help in a normal voice. This was a scream that came from somewhere deep inside a person's body, the kind of sound a human being makes when they believe they are going to die. Ethan's foot hit the brake before his brain even processed what he'd heard. The truck skidded to a stop on the gravel. Dust rose around the cab. The engine idled. He sat there for 5 seconds. Then the scream came again. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. His heart started pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. He knew this road. He knew these woods, and he knew exactly whose territory this was. Everyone in Silver Creek knew, the Hells Angels. The motorcycle club had a compound somewhere deep in these mountains. Nobody talked about it openly. Nobody pointed it out on a map, but everyone understood the unwritten rule: you don't stop on this road. You don't pull over. You don't look into those trees. You drive through, you keep your eyes forward, and you mind your own business. Ethan's uncle had told him that 100 times. That road goes through their land, Ethan. You drive it, you don't stop. Not for a flat tire, not for a deer in the road, not for anything. You understand me? Yes, sir. I mean it. Those men are not people you want to meet. Ethan understood. He wasn't naive. He'd grown up hearing the stories, the rumors of violence, the whispered conversations at the diner, the way the sheriff's deputies avoided certain roads after dark. He knew what the Hells Angels were, and he knew that getting involved with anything connected to them was the worst decision a person could make. The scream came a third time. Ethan turned off the engine. He sat in the silence for a moment, listening. His breath was shaking. His hands were sweating against the wheel. Don't do it, he whispered to himself. Just drive, just go home. But he could hear his grandmother's voice louder than his own. A good person doesn't walk away when someone is hurting. Damn it. He opened the truck door and stepped out. The woods were thick. The light was fading. October in Tennessee meant the sun dropped fast once it got past the tree line, and Ethan could already feel the temperature falling. He moved through the brush, following the sound. Branches scratched at his arms. His boots crunched on dry leaves. Every step felt louder than it should have. He wanted to call out, but something told him not to. Something told him that whatever was happening out here, making noise, would make it worse. He walked for about 200 yards before he found her. She was on the ground, halfway propped against the base of a large oak tree. Her left leg was bent at an angle that immediately told Ethan it was broken. There was blood on her face, a cut above her right eye that had bled down her cheek and dried against her jaw. Her hands were scraped raw, like she'd crawled through rocks and gravel before collapsing here. But the first thing Ethan noticed, the thing that almost made him turn around, was the vest. Black leather, patches on the front and back, the unmistakable insignia that everyone in this part of the country recognized instantly. She was wearing a Hells Angels vest. Ethan froze. Every warning he'd ever heard flooded his brain at once. His uncle's voice, the sheriff's warnings, the stories from the old-timers at the diner, the common sense that every person in Silver Creek carried like a second skin. Walk away. This is not your problem. Whatever happened here, it belongs to their world, not yours. The woman's eyes were closed. She was breathing, but barely. Shallow, ragged breaths that sounded wet, like something was wrong inside her chest. Ethan took one step backward. Then she opened her eyes. They were dark brown, filled with pain and terror, and they locked onto him with a desperation that hit Ethan like a physical blow. Please, she whispered. Her voice was barely audible. Please help me. Ethan felt his legs go weak. His whole body wanted to run. Every survival instinct he had was screaming at him to get back to his truck and drive away and forget he ever saw this woman. But she was looking at him, and she was hurt, and she was terrified. He knelt down beside her and, Ma'am, my name is Ethan. I'm going to help you. Can you tell me what happened? Her eyes widened when she realized he wasn't leaving. For a moment, she looked more afraid of his presence than of her injuries. No, she said, her voice cracking. No, you need to go. Right now, you don't understand. You're hurt. Your leg looks broken and you've got a bad cut on your... Listen to me. She grabbed his wrist with a grip that was surprisingly strong for someone in her condition. You don't know who I am. You don't know what this is. If they find you here with me, who did this to you? She shook her head. It doesn't matter. You need to leave. Run. You don't know what you're getting involved in. Ethan looked at her hand on his wrist. He looked at the blood on her face. He looked at the way her leg was angled wrong, at the way her body was trembling, at the way her eyes kept darting toward the trees like she expected something terrible to emerge at any second. Ma'am, I'm not leaving you here. You're a kid. You're a stupid kid who... I'm 20 years old and I've got a phone and a truck, and I'm not leaving you in these woods to die. Now can you tell me your name? She stared at him. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then very quietly, like the word itself was dangerous, Victoria. My name is Victoria Maddox. Ethan didn't recognize the name. Not then. Later, he'd learn what it meant. Later, he'd understand why she'd hesitated to say it. But in that moment, it was just a name. Okay, Victoria, I'm going to call 911. No, she tried to sit up and immediately cried out in pain, falling back against the tree. No ambulance, no police. You can't call anyone. Your leg is broken. I don't care. You might have internal injuries. If you call the police, people will die. Do you understand me? Not just me, not just you. People will die. Ethan's mouth went dry. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something beyond the pain and the blood and the biker vest. He saw a woman who was genuinely terrified that her rescue would cause more harm than her death. Victoria, who did this to you? She closed her eyes. A tear ran down her face, cutting a clean line through the dried blood. Enemies of my husband. They wanted to send him a message. By hurting you. By killing me. She opened her eyes. They left me here to bleed out. They wanted my husband to find my body. Ethan felt something cold settle in his chest. Not fear exactly. Something deeper than fear. Something that told him this situation was bigger than anything he'd ever encountered. Who is your husband? Victoria looked at him with an expression that was half pity, half despair. Silas Maddox. The name didn't register with Ethan. But the way she said it, like speaking the words out loud, might summon something, told him everything he needed to know about the weight it carried. He's the president. She continued, her voice barely a whisper now. Tennessee chapter. Hell's Angels. The silence that followed those words was absolute. Ethan felt the air leave his lungs. He felt the ground shift slightly beneath his knees. He felt for the first time in his life the full weight of a decision that could not be undone. He was kneeling next to the wife of one of the most powerful and feared men in the entire motorcycle club world, in territory controlled by that club, with no weapon, no backup, no connection to anyone who could protect him. And somewhere in these woods, the people who had done this to her might still be watching. Okay, he said. Victoria blinked. Okay, that's what you say. Yes, ma'am. Okay, I heard you. I understand who your husband is, and I'm still not leaving. You're insane. Maybe, but you're still bleeding, and that leg needs to be stabilized, and we need to figure out a way to get you out of here. So let's start with what I can do right now. He pulled off his flannel shirt and tore it into strips. He worked carefully the way his uncle had taught him to wrap a sprained joint at the shop. Not proper medical training, but close enough to hold something in place until real help arrived. Victoria watched him, and for the first time since he'd found her, the terror in her eyes shifted into something else. Confusion. Why are you doing this? She asked. Because you need help. That's not a reason. Not here. Not with people like us. Ethan paused in his work and looked at her directly. Ma'am, I don't see people like you. I see a person who got hurt. That's all I need to see. Victoria Maddox spent 22 years married to one of the most powerful men in the outlaw biker world. She had seen loyalty, betrayal, violence, brotherhood, and death. She had watched men kill for respect. She had watched men die for pride. But she had never in the 22 years seen a stranger risk his life for nothing. No angle, no debt, no fear, no obligation. Just a boy with a torn flannel shirt and a refusal to leave. She started crying. Not the quiet tears from before. Deep, shaking sobs that seemed to break something open inside her chest. 22 years of living behind walls of fear and power and reputation. And here on the worst day of her life, the only person who came was a kid from a repair shop who didn't even know her husband's name. Ethan didn't try to comfort her with words. He just kept working on the makeshift splint, giving her the space to cry without making her feel embarrassed about it. When she finally stopped, she looked at him with red, swollen eyes. They'll come for you, she said. When Silas finds out what happened, when the club finds out, they will come looking for everyone involved. And they'll find you. They'll find out you were here. Then I guess they'll find out I helped. You don't understand how they think. Maybe not, but I understand how I think. And I think leaving a hurt woman alone in the woods is something I can't do. Victoria shook her head slowly. You're either the bravest person I've ever met or the most foolish. My grandmother would say there's not much difference. For just a second, just the smallest fraction of a moment, Victoria Maddox smiled. Ethan knew he had to make a decision. Victoria had begged him not to call 911, and part of him understood why. If police showed up on Hell's Angels territory with an injured club wife, the situation would escalate in ways nobody could control. But she needed medical attention. The cut on her head was deeper than it looked, the broken leg needed proper setting, and her breathing worried him. He made a call, not to 911, not to the police. He called Ray. Uncle Ray, it's me. Ethan, where are you? I thought you left an hour. I need you to listen to me. I need you to listen and not ask questions until I'm done. There was a pause on the other end. Ray Walker had raised Ethan for 16 years alongside Martha. He knew the boy. He knew that voice. And he knew that when Ethan spoke like that, something serious was happening. I'm listening. I found someone in the woods off the back road. A woman. She's hurt bad. Broken leg, head wound, maybe internal injuries. She doesn't want me to call 911. Then call 911 anyway, Ethan. That's not your Uncle Ray. She's wearing a vest. The silence on the other end of the line lasted so long that Ethan thought the call had dropped. Ray. I heard you. His uncle's voice had changed completely. Flat. Controlled. The voice of a man who was suddenly very aware that the wrong words could cause a disaster. Ethan, listened to me very carefully. Get in your truck and drive home. Right now. I can't do that. You can and you will. She's hurt, Ray. She's been attacked. She can't walk, she can barely breathe, and I'm not going to leave her on the ground in the dark. Do you know who she is? She told me her name. Victoria Maddox. She said her husband is the president of... I know who Silas Maddox is. Ray's voice cracked for the first time. Not anger, fear. Ethan, please, you do not understand what you are in the middle of. I understand that a woman is going to die if nobody helps her. That woman's husband has people who can... Her husband doesn't know where she is. The people who attacked her left her here to die. They wanted Silas to find her body, Ray. Her body. If I leave, that's exactly what happens. Ray went quiet again. Ethan could hear him breathing. He could picture his uncle in the shop office leaning against the desk, rubbing his forehead, the way he always did when the world got too heavy. What do you want me to do? Ray finally asked. I need you to call Doc Henderson. Tell him I've got an emergency and I'm bringing someone in. No questions, no paperwork, no police. Doc Henderson is 70 years old, Ethan. He's he's the best doctor I know, and he owes you a favor from when you fixed his truck last winter. Call him, tell him we're coming. How are you going to move her if her leg is broken? I'll figure it out. Ray exhaled slowly. Your grandmother would kill me for letting you do this. My grandmother is the reason I'm doing this. Another silence. Then quietly, I'll call Henderson. Be careful, Ethan. And I mean that in ways I've never meant it before. Ethan hung up and turned back to Victoria. She'd been listening to his end of the conversation, and her expression had changed again. The fear was still there, but something else was emerging underneath it. Respect. You're really doing this, she said. It wasn't a question. I'm really doing this, but I need your help. I need to get you to my truck. It's about 200 yards that direction. Can you put any weight on your good leg if I support you? I don't know. We're about to find out. Getting Victoria Maddox from the base of that oak tree to Ethan's truck was the hardest physical thing he had ever done. She weighed about 130 pounds, but 130 pounds of injured, semi-conscious human being feels more like 300 when you're navigating uneven ground and fading light. Ethan half-carried, half-dragged her through the brush, stopping every 20 yards to let her rest, to check her breathing to make sure the makeshift splint was still holding. She cried out twice. Once when her broken leg caught on a root. Once when Ethan stumbled and they both nearly went down. Both times she bit down on her lip hard enough to draw blood rather than scream. I've been through worse, she said, through gritted teeth when Ethan asked if she was okay. He didn't doubt it. When they finally reached the truck, Ethan lifted her into the passenger seat as gently as he could. She was drenched in sweat despite the cool October air, and her skin was pale in a way that worried him deeply. Stay awake, he told her, and talk to me. About what? Anything. Tell me something, anything. She leaned her head back against the seat. I met Silas when I was 19. He walked into a diner where I was waitressing. He ordered black coffee and a slice of apple pie, and he sat there for 4 hours. Why 4 hours? He told me later it was because he wanted to watch me work. He said he'd never seen anyone be kind to every single person who walked through the door, even the rude ones, even the ones who didn't tip. She paused. He said kindness was the rarest thing in the world. Ethan glanced at her. That's a good thing for a man to notice. Silas notices everything. That's why people fear him. And that's why you need to understand when he finds out about tonight, he will not forget you. For better or worse, Ethan Walker, you are now someone Silas Maddox knows about. Ethan tightened his grip on the wheel and drove faster. Doc Henderson was waiting at the back door of his small clinic on the edge of town. He was exactly as Ethan's uncle had described, 70 years old, retired grumpy as a wet cat and one of the finest physicians to ever practice in rural Tennessee. He took one look at Victoria and his expression shifted from irritation to professional urgency. Get her inside, now. They carried her to the examination table. Henderson cut away the makeshift splint and began his assessment with hands that were still steady despite his age. Fractured tibia, possible hairline fracture in the fibula. This head laceration needs stitches, and I don't like her breathing, could be a bruised rib pressing against the lung. Can you treat her here? Ethan asked. Henderson looked at him over his glasses. I can set the leg, stitch the wound, and stabilize her for transport, but she needs imaging. She needs a hospital. No hospital, Victoria said from the table, her voice weak but firm. Henderson raised an eyebrow. Young lady, I've been practicing medicine for 45 years, and no hospital. Henderson looked at Ethan. Ethan looked at Victoria. Victoria met both their eyes with a stubbornness that seemed physically impossible, given her condition. Doc, Ethan said carefully, just do what you can here. Please. Henderson held Ethan's gaze for a long moment. Then he glanced at the vest Victoria was wearing. His jaw tightened slightly, and Ethan watched understanding dawn on the old man's face. I see, Henderson said quietly. Ray told me no questions. Now I understand why. He turned back to his patient. All right, Mrs. Maddox, no hospital, but you're going to do exactly what I tell you for the next 4 hours, or I'll call the ambulance myself and let God sort out the consequences. Victoria almost laughed. You know who I am. Sweetheart, I've lived in this county for 40 years. I know who everyone is. Now hold still. While Henderson worked, Ethan stood in the corner of the small clinic, his arms crossed his back against the wall. His hands had finally stopped shaking, but his mind was racing. He'd done the right thing. He believed that. He believed it the way he believed the sun would come up in the morning. But believing you did the right thing and understanding the consequences of the right thing were two entirely different matters. Victoria had told him that Silas would find out. Silas would come looking. And when a man like Silas Maddox came looking, things happened. Big things, unpredictable things, things that couldn't be undone. His phone buzzed, a text from Uncle Ray. How is she? Ethan typed back. Helen is treating her. She's stable. 3 dots appeared. Then people are already asking questions. Somebody saw your truck on that road. Word travels fast in this town, Ethan. Faster than you think. Ethan stared at the message. Then another one came through. Come home, lock your doors, and pray to God that Silas Maddox is the kind of man who says thank you before he asks questions. Ethan put his phone away. Henderson finished stitching Victoria's head wound and moved to setting her leg. The process was painful. Victoria gripped the edges of the examination table so hard her knuckles went white, but she didn't scream. She didn't make a sound. When it was over, Henderson wrapped the leg in a proper splint and stood back. That'll hold for now. She needs rest. She needs fluids. And she needs to see a real orthopedic surgeon within 48 hours, or that leg won't heal right. Thank you, Doc, Ethan said. Henderson washed his hands slowly, deliberately, like a man choosing his next words very carefully. Ethan, I've known you since you were a little boy. I set your arm when you fell off that bike on Maple Street. I gave you your tetanus shots. I told your grandmother she was doing a fine job raising you. I remember. So I'm going to say this to you the way I'd say it to my own grandson. He dried his hands and looked Ethan dead in the eyes. What you did tonight was good. It was right. It was exactly what a decent human being is supposed to do. And it might be the most dangerous thing anyone in this town has done in 30 years. I know. No, you don't. You know part of it, the part you can see, but there are things in motion now that you can't see, and those are the things that will change your life. Henderson folded the towel neatly and set it on the counter. Go home. Get some sleep. And whatever happens tomorrow, remember that I'm proud of you. Your grandmother would be proud of you. Ethan nodded. He turned to Victoria, who was lying on the table with her eyes half closed, exhaustion finally winning the battle against adrenaline. I'm going to make sure someone stays with you, Ethan said. You've done enough, Victoria whispered. Maybe, but I'll feel better knowing you're not alone. She opened her eyes fully and looked at him. Ethan, Yes, ma'am. When they come, and they will come, tell them the truth. All of it. Don't hide anything. Don't try to play it down. Silas respects honesty more than anything else in this world. If you lie to him, even to protect yourself, he'll never trust you. And you want Silas Maddox to trust you. Why, Warren? Because the alternative is something you don't want to think about. Ethan held her gaze for a moment. Then he nodded once and walked out of the clinic. He drove home in the dark. The roads were empty. The sky was full of stars. When he pulled into his driveway and turned off the engine, he sat in the truck for 10 minutes without moving, just breathing, just trying to understand what had happened in the last 3 hours. He'd left work. He'd driven down a road. He'd heard a scream. And now the president of the Hells Angels Tennessee chapter was going to learn his name. Ethan's phone rang. He didn't recognize the number. He answered anyway. Ethan Walker. The voice on the other end was deep gravelly and carried an authority that Ethan could feel through the phone. This is Ethan. My name is Silas Maddox. I think you and I need to talk. The stars above Silver Creek seemed to hold their breath. Ethan gripped his phone tighter and said the only word that mattered. Yes, sir. Part to the club that never forgot. The silence on the phone lasted exactly 4 seconds. Ethan counted them because counting was the only thing keeping his hands from shaking. You're the one who found her, Silas Maddox said. It was not a question. Yes, sir. Where is she right now? She's safe. She's with a doctor, a private doctor. No hospital, no police, just like she asked. Ethan heard breathing on the other end. Heavy, controlled breathing, the kind of breathing a man does when he's trying not to explode. Is she alive? Yes, sir. Broken leg, a bad cut on her head, maybe a bruised rib. The doctor stabilized her. She's resting. Where? Ethan hesitated. Victoria had told him to be honest with Silas. She'd told him that honesty was the only currency this man respected. But giving a location over the phone, giving the president of the Hells Angels a direct address in his small town felt like opening a door that could never be closed. Mr. Maddox, I'll tell you where she is, but I need you to know that the doctor who treated her did it as a favor. He's a 70-year-old retired physician. He's not involved in any of this. Whatever happens next, he stays out of it. Another pause, longer this time. You're making conditions, Silas said. There was something in his voice that might have been surprise, or might have been the beginning of anger. Ethan couldn't tell. No, sir, I'm asking you to protect an old man who helped your wife because I asked him to. You asked him? Yes, sir. You found my wife in those woods, you carried her out. You found a doctor, and you treated her without calling the police or the hospital. And now you're asking me to protect the doctor. That's correct. How old are you? 20. Silas Maddox let out a breath that sounded like it had been trapped inside his chest for hours. Give me the address. Ethan gave it to him. I'll be there in 90 minutes, Silas said. Don't leave. The line went dead. Ethan stared at his phone for a long time. Then he called Uncle Ray. He's coming, Ethan said. Ray didn't need to ask who. How long? 90 minutes. I'm coming to Henderson's. Don't go back there alone. Uncle Ray. Shut up, Ethan. I let you do this your way tonight. Now you let me do this my way. I'm not letting you face Silas Maddox by yourself. Ethan wanted to argue, but the truth was he didn't want to be alone when that man walked through Henderson's door. Not because he was afraid of what Silas would do, but because he was afraid of what Silas would be. He'd heard the stories. Everyone had. Silas Maddox had been in the club for over 30 years. He'd risen through the ranks in ways that nobody talked about openly. People said he was fair. People also said that his definition of fair and the rest of the world's definition of fair were two very different things. Ethan drove back to Henderson's clinic. Ray arrived 10 minutes later, still wearing his work clothes, grease under his fingernails, a look on his face that Ethan had never seen before. It wasn't anger, it wasn't worry. It was the face of a man who was preparing himself for something he'd spent his entire life avoiding. Is she awake? Ray asked. I don't know. Henderson's with her. They went inside. Henderson was sitting in a chair next to Victoria, monitoring her pulse. She was asleep but restlessly, her fingers twitching, her lips moving slightly as if she were talking to someone in a dream. Henderson looked up when they entered. She's stable, but I don't like her oxygen levels. If they drop any further, I'm calling an ambulance, whether she wants one or not. Her husband is coming, Ethan said. Henderson's hand paused on Victoria's wrist. How soon? Maybe an hour now. The old doctor took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. Ethan, in 45 years of practicing medicine, I've delivered babies, I've told families their loved ones didn't make it, and I once performed an emergency appendectomy in the back of a pickup truck during a flood. None of those things scared me. He put his glasses back on. Right now, I'm scared. You don't have to be here when he arrives, Doc. The hell I don't. She's my patient. I don't abandon patients. That's the difference between me and whatever animals did this to her. Ray pulled Ethan aside. What exactly did he say on the phone? He asked where she was. He asked if she was alive. He said he'd be here in 90 minutes and told me not to leave. That's it. That's it. He didn't threaten you. No. Ray rubbed his forehead. That could mean anything, Ethan. With men like him, silence is more dangerous than threats. Or it could mean he just wants to see his wife. Ray looked at his nephew, 20 years old, blonde hair sticking up from the sweat and the struggle in the woods. Flannel shirt torn to pieces because he'd used it to make a splint. Dirt on his jeans, scratches on his arms, exhaustion in his eyes. And underneath all of it, a steadiness that Ray had always seen but never fully understood until tonight. Your mother was like this, Ray said quietly. My sister. She was the same way. She'd walk into a burning building if she thought someone was inside, drove everyone crazy. Grandma used to tell me that. Your grandmother used to cry about it. She was terrified your mother's heart would get her killed one day. Ray paused. And then it did, in a way. She was driving that night because she'd stayed late helping a friend move furniture. If she'd left on time, she wouldn't have been on that road in the rain. Ethan said nothing. He'd never heard that detail before. He didn't know if it changed anything, but he felt it settle into him like a stone dropping into deep water. I'm not trying to talk you out of what you did, Ray continued. I'm trying to make sure you survive what comes next. They waited. 53 minutes later, Ethan heard the sound. It started low like distant thunder. Then it grew, a deep rolling rumble that vibrated through the walls of Henderson's small clinic. The kind of sound that made the glass bottles on Henderson's medicine shelf rattle against each other. Motorcycles. Not one or two. Many. Ray moved to the window. His face went pale. Good God. Ethan joined him and looked outside. The road in front of Henderson's clinic was filling with motorcycles. One after another. Their headlights cut through the dark like a procession of stars. They pulled in methodically, parking in perfect formation. Engines shutting off one by one until the street was lined with chrome and leather. Ethan counted. He stopped at 30. He brought the chapter, Ray whispered. The riders dismounted. They were big men, most of them. Beards, tattoos, leather vests with patches and insignia. They moved with a discipline that surprised Ethan. No shouting, no chaos. They positioned themselves along the road in the parking lot like soldiers establishing a perimeter. Then the last motorcycle pulled in. It was bigger than the rest. The man riding it was bigger than the rest. He swung off the bike with a fluid motion that contradicted his size, and he stood there for a moment perfectly still, surveying the building in front of him. Even from inside, Ethan could feel the authority radiating off the man like heat from an engine block. Silas Maddox had arrived. Henderson appeared beside Ethan. If he asks about her condition, I'll tell him. Medical facts only. I don't editorialize, I don't speculate, and I don't apologize. Understood, Doc. And Ethan, yeah. Stand up straight. Men like him can smell uncertainty. The door of the clinic opened. Silas Maddox stepped inside and everything about the room changed. The air felt heavier. The light felt dimmer. The space felt smaller. I was 6'3", maybe 6'4". Broad shoulders, thick arms, silver hair pulled back tight. His face was weathered-lined hard in a way that spoke of decades lived on the edge of violence. His eyes were dark, not brown, not black, something in between, and they moved across the room with a precision that missed nothing. Behind him, two men entered. They flanked him close enough to be ready, but far enough back to signal that Silas didn't need protection. He was the protection. Silas looked at Henderson first. You're the doctor. I am. How is she? Henderson straightened his back. Fractured tibia, possible hairline fracture in the fibula. 6-centimeter laceration above the right brow, closed with 12 sutures. Suspected bruised ribs, second or third right side. Her oxygen levels have been lower than I'd like, but they've stabilized in the last hour. She needs imaging within 48 hours. She needs an orthopedic consult, and she needs rest. Silas absorbed this without expression. You treated her here alone. I did. Why, Tom? Because a young man called and said a woman was hurt. I'm a doctor. That's what I do. Something flickered across Silas's face, not a smile, not warmth, but an acknowledgement, a tiny nod of recognition like one professional assessing another. I want to see her. Henderson stepped aside and gestured toward the back room. Silas walked past him, past Ray past Ethan, and into the room where Victoria lay. He stopped in the doorway. Ethan watched from the hallway. He saw the exact moment that Silas Maddox, president leader, feared man disappeared, and the husband took his place. Silas's shoulders dropped, his jaw unclenched, his hands, which had been rigid at his sides, began to shake. He crossed the room in 3 steps and knelt beside the examination table, and he took Victoria's hand in both of his, and he pressed his forehead against her fingers. Vic, he said, just the one word. But the way he said it carried 30 years of marriage, 30 years of love, 30 years of fear, that one day the life he'd chosen would take the one thing he couldn't live without. Victoria's eyes opened. She looked at her husband, and her face crumbled, and she reached for him with her free hand and touched his cheek. I'm here, she whispered. I'm okay. You're not okay. Look at you. I'm alive, Silas. I'm alive because of that boy. Silas didn't turn around, but Ethan saw his back stiffen, saw his head tilt slightly, saw the awareness of another presence register in the man's body. Tell me everything, Silas said to his wife. From the beginning, Victoria told him. She told him about the ambush on the road, about the 3 men who'd forced her car off the shoulder, about how they dragged her into the woods, beaten her, broken her leg, and left her there with a message carved into the dirt beside her. This is what happens. She told him about the hours she spent on the ground, unable to move, unable to call for help because they'd taken her phone, about how she'd screamed until her throat was raw, about how she'd started to accept that she was going to die alone in those woods. And then she told him about the boy. He came through the trees. He was scared. I could see it in his face. He was terrified. But he knelt down next to me and he said, "Ma'am, my name is Ethan. I'm going to help you." And I told him to run. I told him to leave. I told him he didn't know what he was getting into. And he said, "I'm not leaving you here." Just like that. Like it was the simplest thing in the world. Victoria's voice broke. He tore his own shirt to make a splint. He carried me 200 yards through the brush. He called his uncle, found a doctor, and brought me here. He never asked for anything. He never hesitated. He just did it. Silas was quiet for the long time. His forehead was still pressed against Victoria's hand. And when he finally spoke, his voice was different, lower, rougher, like the words were being pulled from somewhere deep inside him that didn't get opened very often. He knew who you were. I told him your name. I told him what the club was. I told him everything. And he stayed. He stayed, though. Silas lifted his head. He kissed his wife's hand. Then he stood up and the husband disappeared and the president returned. But something was different now. The hardness was still there, but underneath it, something had cracked. Something human had broken through. He turned around and walked back into the hallway. Ethan was standing exactly where he'd been. Hands at his sides, not fidgeting, not posturing, not trying to look tough or submissive or anything at all, just standing. Silas stopped 3 feet in front of him. The 2 men looked at each other, 20 years old versus 57, a mechanic versus a club president, a boy who'd never been in a real fight versus a man who'd seen things that would give most people nightmares. She told you to run, Silas said. Yes, sir. And you didn't. No, sir. Why? Ethan thought about the question. He thought about giving a long answer, an explanation, a justification. But something told him that Silas Maddox did not want a speech. He wanted the truth, and the truth was simple. Because she needed help, and I was there. Silas studied him. It was a look that Ethan imagined had broken stronger men, a long, unblinking assessment that searched for lies, for angles, for hidden motives. The kind of look that could see through every mask a person had ever worn. You're not in the club, Silas said. You've got no connection to us, no debts, no history. No, sir. You've got nothing to gain from what you did. That's correct. And you knew that getting involved could put you in danger. My wife told you that. She did. But you did it anyway. Yes, sir. Silas nodded slowly. Then he did something that made every person in that hallway hold their breath. He extended his hand. Ethan looked at it. A large hand scarred across the knuckles, a silver ring on the index finger bearing the club insignia. A hand that had done things Ethan didn't want to imagine. A hand that was now being offered to him in a gesture that in Silas Maddox's world meant more than most people could understand. Ethan shook it. Silas's grip was firm but not crushing. He held Ethan's hand for 3 seconds longer than a normal handshake. You saved my wife's life, Silas said. I don't forget that. The club doesn't forget that. Whatever you need, whenever you need it, for as long as you live, you come to me. I don't need anything, Mr. Maddox. I know you don't. That's why I'm offering. Silas released his hand and turned to Henderson. Doctor, I'm having my own physician come in the morning to examine my wife. Until then, she stays here. I'll have 2 men outside this door all night. They won't bother you. They won't come inside unless you call for them. They're here to make sure nobody else gets to her. Henderson nodded. Fine, but they don't smoke in my parking lot. Silas almost smiled. Almost. The corner of his mouth twitched, and that was as close as he got. Fair enough. He turned back to Ethan one final time. What you did tonight took more guts than anything I've seen from men who've been in this life for decades. You're not one of us. I'm not going to try to make you one of us, but you are under my protection now, Ethan Walker. And everybody in my world is going to know it. He walked out. The 2 men followed. The door closed behind them. Ethan, Ray, and Henderson stood in the hallway listening to the sound of 30 motorcycles starting up one by one, filling the night with thunder before gradually fading into the distance. Henderson was the first to speak. Well, that was the most terrifying 45 minutes of my life. I need a drink. Ray looked at Ethan. You understand what just happened? He shook my hand. He put you under the protection of the Hells Angels. Do you know what that means? Not really. It means that as of tonight, hurting you is the same as hurting them. It means every chapter, every member, every associate connected to that club now knows your name. It means you went from being nobody to being somebody in a world you don't belong to. Ethan leaned against the wall and closed his eyes. All I did was help someone. I know, son. That's the part that scares me. The next morning, Silver Creek woke up to something it had never seen before. The town had one main street, one traffic light, 2 churches, a diner, a hardware store, and a population of 3,000 people who mostly knew each other by name. It was the kind of place where the biggest event of the year was the 4th of July parade, and the most controversial topic at the town council meeting was whether to repave the parking lot behind the library. That morning, 47 motorcycles were parked along Main Street. By noon, there were over 100. By evening, 260. They came from every direction. Tennessee plates, Kentucky plates, North Carolina, Virginia, Georgia, Alabama. They rolled into Silver Creek in groups of 10 and 20, the sound of their engines announcing their arrival long before anyone could see them. The town panicked. Margaret Reynolds, who ran the diner, called the sheriff's office 6 times before lunch. There are bikers everywhere, she told the dispatcher. They're sitting on the sidewalk. They're at the gas station. There's one in my diner right now ordering pancakes. Pancakes? What kind of biker orders pancakes? The sheriff, a man named Dale Hobbs, who'd held the position for 18 years, drove down Main Street slowly surveying the situation. Bikers lined both sides of the road. They leaned against their motorcycles, smoking cigarettes, talking to each other in low voices. Some of them nodded at the sheriff's car as it passed. None of them looked hostile, but they were there, and that alone was enough to make every resident of Silver Creek lock their doors and check their windows. Sheriff Hobbs pulled up in front of the diner and went inside. He found Ray Walker sitting at the counter drinking coffee with a look on his face that suggested he hadn't slept. Ray, Dale, you want to tell me what's happening in my town? Ray set down his coffee. It's not your town right now, Dale. Not today. The hell it isn't. Silas Maddox's wife was attacked in the woods off the back road 2 days ago, left for dead. My nephew found her, saved her life. Now Silas has put the word out, and every Hell's Angel within 500 miles is coming here. Hobbs sat down heavily on the stool next to Ray. Coming here for what? I don't know yet, but they haven't broken any laws. They haven't threatened anyone. They're just here. 260 bikers don't just show up in a town of 3,000 for no reason. I agree, which is why I think you should talk to Silas before you do anything else. Talk to him. He's a reasonable man, Dale. More reasonable than you'd think. He's the president of the Hells Angels. And right now, he's a husband whose wife almost died and a man who's grateful to a 20-year-old kid for saving her. You can work with that, or you can treat this like an invasion and watch everything go sideways. Hobbs rubbed his jaw. He looked out the window at the bikers on the street, then back at Ray. Where is this man? He's at Henderson's clinic with Victoria. She's still there. And your nephew? Ethan's at home. I told him to stay put until this settles. Hobbs stood up. I'm going to regret this. Probably, but you'd regret the alternative more. Sheriff Hobbs drove to Henderson's clinic and found exactly what Ray had described. Two bikers stood at the front door. They were polite. They called him Sir. They told him Silas was inside and was expecting him. That last part bothered Hobbs more than anything. Expecting him, like Silas had already calculated every move the town would make. Inside, Silas was sitting in a chair next to Victoria's bed reading a newspaper. He looked up, Hobbs entered and stood slowly extending his hand. Sheriff, thank you for coming. Hobbs shook his hand because refusing would have been a provocation he couldn't afford. Mr. Maddox, I've got over 200 of your people in my town. My phone hasn't stopped ringing. My residents are frightened. I need to know what's happening. Silas folded the newspaper and set it aside. What's happening is very simple, Sheriff. 2 nights ago, 3 men ambushed my wife on a road in your jurisdiction. They broke her leg. They split her head open. They left her in the woods to die. A young man from your town found her and saved her life at considerable risk to himself. I'm aware of that. I spoke with Ray Walker this morning. Then you're also aware that the men who did this are still out there. They haven't been caught. They haven't been identified. And until they are, my wife and the young man who saved her are both in danger. Hobbs shifted his weight. That's a matter for law enforcement, Mr. Maddox. With all due respect, Sheriff Law Enforcement wasn't there when my wife was screaming in those woods. A 20-year-old mechanic was. Silas let that sentence sit in the air. I'm not here to cause problems. My people are not here to cause problems. We are here because one of ours was attacked and a good person from this town stepped up when no one else did. We came to make sure that person is safe and to show this community that what Ethan Walker did will not be forgotten. How long do you plan to stay? As long as it takes. Hobbs felt the ground shifting beneath him. That he was a good sheriff, honest, decent, competent. But nothing in his 18 years of experience had prepared him for a conversation like this. I need your word, Hobbs said carefully, that your people will respect this town. No violence, no intimidation, no destruction of property. These are families, Mr. Maddox, working people. They didn't ask for any of this. Neither did my wife. Silas's voice hardened for just a moment, then softened again. You have my word, Sheriff. We are guests here. We will behave like guests. But I want something from you in return. What? I want the men who attacked Victoria found. I want them found by law enforcement through proper channels before my people find them through ours. Because I promise you, Sheriff, if we find them first, there won't be a trial. The 2 men stood face to face in Henderson's small clinic. And for a moment, the entire balance of Silver Creek hung between them. I'll do my job, Hobbs said. That's all I'm asking. Hobbs turned to leave, then stopped. The boy, Ethan Walker, is he safe? Silas looked at him with an expression that carried the full weight of everything he was. That boy is the safest person in the state of Tennessee right now. The sheriff left. He drove back to his office. He sat at his desk, and he picked up the phone and called the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. Meanwhile, word about Ethan had already left Silver Creek. It started the way things always start. In small towns, a whispered conversation at the post office, a phone call between cousins, a text message forwarded from one group chat to another. Within 24 hours, the basic outline of the story had reached Nashville. Within 48 hours, a reporter from a Knoxville television station called the sheriff's office asking for a comment. Hobbs declined, but the story didn't need his comment. It had its own momentum now. A 20-year-old mechanic saves the wife of a Hells Angels president. Hundreds of bikers descend on a tiny Tennessee town. The club doesn't come for revenge, they come to honor the kid. It was the kind of story that people couldn't stop talking about because it violated everything they expected. The Hells Angels were supposed to be dangerous. They were supposed to be the villains. They weren't supposed to show up in a small town and order pancakes and shake hands with the sheriff and stand guard over an old doctor's clinic. Ethan, sitting at his kitchen table on the second morning after the rescue, had no idea any of this was happening. He'd been trying to eat breakfast, a bowl of cereal that had gone soggy 30 minutes ago because he kept picking up his phone, staring at it, and putting it down again. He'd replayed the conversation with Silas 100 times. Every word, every pause, every shift in the man's expression. "You are under my protection now, Ethan Walker." What did that even mean in practical terms? Was someone going to follow him around? Were bikers going to show up at the shop? Was his life going to change? Or was this just a dramatic moment that would fade when Silas got Victoria home and the club moved on? His phone rang. It was Ray. "Ethan, you need to come to the shop." "Why, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong, but there's someone here who wants to talk to you." "Who person? Just come." Ethan drove to the shop. He parked in his usual spot. He walked to the front door, and he stopped. Silas Maddox was sitting in Ray's office chair drinking coffee from the mug Ethan had bought Ray for Father's Day 3 years ago, the one that said "World's Okayest Mechanic." Beside him stood a woman Ethan didn't recognize. She was tall, sharp-featured, with dark hair pulled back in a braid. She wore a leather vest similar to Victoria's, but without the same patches. She watched Ethan with eyes that evaluated him the way a jeweler evaluates a stone. "Sit down, Ethan," Silas said. Ethan sat on the edge of the workbench. Ray stood in the corner with his arms crossed, looking like a man who was trying very hard to appear calm. "This is Donna Cole," Silas said, gesturing to the woman. "She's our chapter's vice president's wife and the head of our community outreach." "Community outreach," Ethan repeated. "We do more than ride motorcycles, son." Silas set down the coffee mug. "I came here for 2 reasons. First, Victoria wants to see you. She's been asking for you since last night. Is she okay?" "My physician examined her this morning. Confirmed everything your doctor said. She's got a long recovery ahead, but she's going to be fine. Because of you. I'm glad she's okay." "Second thing," Silas leaned forward. "I told you last night that the club doesn't forget. I meant that. And I want to show you what that means. Not in words, in action." Ethan glanced at Ray. Ray gave him nothing, just a tight expression that said, "Listen." "This town took care of my wife," Silas continued. "Your doctor, your uncle, you. This town didn't turn its back, so the club wants to do something for this town." "What kind of something?" "Donna will explain. She's better at this part than I am." Donna Cole stepped forward. She spoke clearly, directly, without the hard edges Ethan expected. "We've already talked to several business owners on Main Street. The hardware store needs a new roof. The community center hasn't been painted in 10 years. The road behind the church is full of potholes. We've got 200 men here with nothing to do. We'd like to put them to work." Ethan blinked. "You want the Hells Angels to fix up Silver Creek?" "That's exactly what we want," Donna said. "No charge, no strings, just labor and gratitude." Ethan looked at Silas. "You're serious." "Dead serious. And one more thing." Silas reached into the inside pocket of his vest and pulled out something wrapped in black cloth. He unfolded it slowly and held it up. It was a vest, black leather like the ones the club members wore, but different. The patches were different. Instead of the standard club markings, this vest bore a single emblem on the back, an open hand palm up, surrounded by the words, "Honored by the Hells Angels." "This is not a membership," Silas said. "This is not recruitment. This is a symbol. It means you have earned the respect of every man and woman who wears our patch. Anyone who sees this knows that you stood up when it mattered." He held it out toward Ethan. The room was completely silent. Ray's hands had dropped to his sides. Donna Cole watched with an expression that told Ethan she didn't see this happen often. Maybe never. Ethan looked at the vest. He looked at Silas. He thought about his grandmother. He thought about her voice saying a good person doesn't walk away when someone is hurting. He hadn't walked away. And now the world he'd walked into was offering him something he'd never asked for and didn't fully understand. He reached out and took the vest. Silas nodded once. Just once. And in that single nod was everything the man would never say out loud. Gratitude, respect, and a bond that would follow Ethan Walker for the rest of his life. But 2 miles away, parked in a rusted sedan at the edge of a gas station, a man with a scar across his jaw was watching the bikers through a pair of cheap binoculars. He picked up his phone and dialed a number. "It's me," he said. "We've got a problem. The whole damn club is here, And they've got a new friend. The voice on the other end was cold. Amedimus. Who pay him? Some kid, a local. They're treating him like family. Then we add him to the list. The man lowered the binoculars. You sure about this? The whole town is crawling with patches. I don't care if the whole state is crawling with patches. We sent a message, and instead of fear, we got a parade. That's unacceptable. Find the kid. Find out where he lives, and find out what he cares about. And then, and then we show everyone that kindness has consequences. The line went dead. The man with the scar started his engine and pulled out of the gas station, driving slowly past the rows of parked motorcycles, past the diner where bikers sat eating pancakes, past the clinic where Victoria Maddox was laughing for the first time in 3 days. He drove past all of it, and nobody noticed him. Nobody saw the predator hiding among the crowd. And nobody knew that the people who had tried to kill Victoria Maddox were not finished, that they had watched the town embrace the bikers, that they had watched a 20-year-old boy become a symbol of everything they wanted to destroy. Ethan Walker had saved one life and earned the protection of an army. But the men in the shadows weren't afraid of armies. They were afraid of what Ethan represented, and fear in their world was something that had to be eliminated. The man with the scar was named Declan Price, and he had been watching Silver Creek for exactly 72 hours. He knew the layout of Main Street. He knew which businesses had back doors and which didn't. He knew the sheriff's patrol schedule twice down Main at 10 a.m., once at 3, and a final pass at 9 p.m. before Hobbs went home to his wife and his television. He knew that the bikers rotated guard shifts at Henderson's clinic every 8 hours. He knew that Ethan Walker drove a 2001 Chevy Silverado, lived alone in a rented house on Birch Lane, and left for work at 7:15 every morning. And he knew that the man who'd hired him, a rival club enforcer named Royce Brennan, did not accept failure. The attack on Victoria had been Brennan's idea. A surgical strike designed to break Silas Maddox's spirit. Kill the wife, send a message, watch the old man crumble. It was supposed to be clean. It was supposed to be final. Instead, a 20-year-old mechanic had ruined everything. Declan sat in a motel room 14 miles outside of Silver Creek and dialed Brennan's number. The town is locked down, Declan said. Maddox has over 200 riders in there. They're rebuilding the damn place, fixing roofs, painting buildings. The locals love them. The sheriff is cooperating. And the kid, this Ethan Walker, he's untouchable right now. There are eyes on him 24 hours a day. Brennan was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the patience of a man who had learned that patience was a weapon. Then we don't touch the kid. So what do? We touch what the kid loves. Declan felt a cold knot form in his stomach. He'd done bad things in his life. Things he didn't talk about, things he didn't think about when the lights were off. But Brennan operated on a level that made even hardened men uncomfortable. What does he love? Declan asked. Everybody loves something. Find it and bring it to me. The call ended. Declan stared at the phone in his hand for a long time. Then he opened his laptop, connected to the motel's sluggish Wi-Fi, and started searching. It didn't take long. Ethan Walker, age 20, parents deceased, raised by grandmother Martha Walker, currently residing at Sunset Acres Assisted Living in Fairview, Tennessee, 23 miles from Silver Creek. Declan closed the laptop. He had what he needed. That same morning, Ethan walked into Henderson's clinic, carrying a paper bag from the diner. Victoria was sitting up in bed for the first time. Her leg elevated, her color better than it had been 3 days ago. Henderson had grudgingly admitted that she was healing faster than he'd expected. I brought you breakfast, Ethan said, setting the bag on the table beside her. Margaret at the diner made you her special biscuits. She said to tell you that any woman who can survive what you survived deserves extra butter. Victoria laughed. It was a real laugh, open, unguarded, and it transformed her face. For the first time, Ethan could see the woman underneath the biker wife, the waitress who'd served apple pie to a stranger 30 years ago. Sit down, Victoria said. Talk to me. About what? About you. Silas tells me you work at your uncle's shop, that you fix cars. Yes, ma'am. Stop calling me ma'am. I'm 49, not 90. Sorry, habit. My grandmother would knock me sideways if I called any woman by her first name without permission. You have my permission. Call me Victoria. She opened the bag and pulled out a biscuit. Tell me about your grandmother. Ethan sat in the chair beside the bed. Her name is Martha. She raised me after my parents died. She's in a care facility now about 20 miles from here. I visit her every Sunday. What's she like? Tough, kind. She's got this way of looking at you that makes you feel like she can see right through everything you're pretending to be. He smiled. She can barely remember my name some days, but she always remembers the lesson. What lesson? A good person doesn't walk away when someone is hurting. Victoria stopped chewing, set the biscuit down and looked at Ethan with an intensity that caught him off guard. She taught you that every night before bed for 14 years. And that's why you stopped. That's why I stopped. Victoria reached across the table and took his hand. Her grip was gentle this time, nothing like the desperate clutch in the woods. Ethan, I need you to hear something. What's happening in this town right now, the bikers, the rebuilding, Silas's protection, it's real, it's genuine. But it has also painted a target on your back. I know. No, you know it here. She touched her temple. You don't know it here. She touched her chest. The men who attacked me are not gone. They're watching. They failed once, and that's the most dangerous thing that can happen to men like them. A failed message is worse than no message at all. They need to correct it. What are you saying? I'm saying they'll come back, and when they do, they won't come for me. They'll come for you, or for someone you love. Ethan's blood went cold. His mind went immediately to one place, one person. A 78-year-old woman in a small room at Sunset Acres who sometimes forgot his name, but never forgot to tell him to be good. My grandmother, he said. Victoria's eyes confirmed his fear. Silas has already thought of this. He wants to put people on her. Guards, protection. At a nursing home, Victoria, she's an old woman with dementia. If bikers show up at her door, it'll terrify her. Better terrified than hurt. Ethan stood up. The chair scraped back across the floor. His hands were shaking again, not from fear this time, but from a sudden overwhelming rage that he didn't know he was capable of. These people, he said in his voice low and tight, these men who hurt you, they would go after a 78-year-old woman in a nursing home. They would go after anyone. They don't have rules, Ethan. That's the difference between them and us. We have rules. They have objectives. Ethan turned toward the door. Where are you going? Victoria asked. To talk to Silas. Ethan waited, but he was already gone. He found Silas on Main Street, standing with Donna Cole and 3 other club members in front of the hardware store. 2 bikers were on the roof replacing damaged shingles. A 3rd was painting the front door. The owner of the store, an elderly man named Frank Jessup, was standing on the sidewalk, watching with an expression of complete bewilderment. Mr. Maddox, Ethan said. Silas turned. He read Ethan's face instantly, the same way he read every face, every room, every situation, and nodded to Donna. Give us a minute. The group moved away. Silas crossed his arms and looked at Ethan. Victoria told you. About my grandmother? Yeah, she told me. I was going to tell you myself this afternoon. Is she in danger? Silas didn't soften the truth. He didn't dress it up. He gave it to Ethan the way he gave everything straight. Yes, if Brennan's people are smart and they've already identified everyone connected to you, your uncle, your doctor friend, and your grandmother, then we need to move her. We're already working on it. I've got a prospect in Fairview checking on her right now. If she's safe, we'll put a rotation on the facility. If she's compromised, we'll move her. Compromised? She's a 78-year-old woman in a bed, Silas. She doesn't even know what day it is half the time. And that makes her the perfect target, because hurting her hurts you. And hurting you undermines everything that's happened here. That's how these people think. Ethan's jaw clenched. He looked down at the ground, then back at Silas. I never wanted any of this. I just heard someone screaming in the woods. I know. I'm a mechanic. I fix cars. I eat dinner alone. I visit my grandmother on Sundays. That's my life. That's all of it. Silas put his hand on Ethan's shoulder. It was a heavy hand, and the weight of it communicated something words couldn't. Your life changed the moment you stepped out of that truck. I can't undo that. Nobody can. But I can make sure the people you love are safe. That's a promise, Ethan. Not a club promise, a personal one. From me. Ethan's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. An unknown number. A text message. 3 words. Nice nursing home. Every muscle in Ethan's body seized. He shoved the phone towards Silas. Silas read the message, and Ethan watched something happen to the man's face that he'd never forget. The calm evaporated. The calculated control vanished. What replaced it was something ancient and lethal, the look of a predator whose territory had been violated. Silas pulled out his own phone and dialed. The call connected in 2 seconds. Cutter, the nursing home, now, full team. I don't care what you're doing. Get there. Call me when she's secure. He hung up and looked at Ethan. We're going, right now. I'm driving, Ethan said. No, you're riding with me. Marcus will follow in your truck. 3 minutes later, Ethan was on the back of Silas Maddox's motorcycle, gripping the seat rail as they tore out of Silver Creek at a speed that turned the road into a blur. Behind them, 8 motorcycles fell into formation. Ahead of them, 23 miles of highway, and a question that burned in Ethan's chest like a hot coal. Was he too late? The ride took 14 minutes. Silas rode like a man who'd been born on a motorcycle, leaning into curves, accelerating through straightaways, navigating traffic with a precision that felt almost supernatural. Ethan held on and tried not to think about what they might find. They arrived at Sunset Acres at 11:47 a.m. The parking lot was quiet, no strange cars, no signs of disturbance. The front entrance looked exactly the way it always looked, a set of glass doors with a welcome mat and a fake plant on either side. Silas killed the engine. The 8 riders behind him did the same. Stay behind me, Silas said. The hell I will. Ethan pushed past him and walked through the front doors. The receptionist, a young woman named Tammy, looked up from her desk and nearly fell out of her chair when she saw Ethan followed by 9 men in leather vests. Ethan, what's going? Tammy, has anyone been here to visit my grandmother today? Anyone I don't know? I don't think so. Let me check the sign-in sheet. She turned the visitor log toward him. Ethan scanned the names, his own from last Sunday. A nurse practitioner on Monday, a physical therapist on Tuesday, and one more entry, Wednesday, yesterday, a name Ethan didn't recognize. David Reynolds, family friend, 2:15 p.m. Who is David Reynolds? Ethan asked. Tammy shook her head. I wasn't on shift yesterday. Let me ask Janet. Silas stepped forward. Call your security. Pull your camera footage for yesterday afternoon. Do it now. Tammy looked at Silas, looked at the vest, looked at Ethan. Ethan nodded. She picked up the phone. Ethan didn't wait. He walked down the hallway to room 114, the same room he'd walked to every Sunday for the past 2 years. His heart was hammering so hard he could feel it in his teeth. He opened the door. Martha Walker was sitting in her recliner by the window, a blanket across her lap, a cup of tea on the table beside her. She was watching a game show on the small television mounted to the wall. She looked exactly the way she always looked, small, white-haired, fragile, alive. She looked up when Ethan entered. Well, hello there, she said. And then with a clarity that pierced through everything, through the fear and the rage and the chaos of the last 4 days. Ethan, my Ethan, you look tired, sweetheart. Ethan crossed the room and knelt beside her chair and took her hand and pressed it to his forehead, and he stayed there for a long moment, breathing, just breathing, feeling the warmth of her skin and the steadiness of her pulse and the impossible, fragile miracle of her being alive. I'm okay, Grandma. I'm okay. Of course you are. You've always been okay. She touched his hair with her free hand. Did you eat today? Yes, ma'am. Good. A boy who doesn't eat can't think straight. She noticed the men in the hallway behind him. Who are your friends? Ethan looked back. Silas was standing in the doorway and something on his face had changed. The predator was gone. The president was gone. Standing in the doorway of room 114 at Sunset Acres was a man looking at an old woman who reminded him of something he'd lost a long time ago. They're friends, Grandma. They're just friends. Martha squinted at Silas. You're a big one, aren't you? Silas almost smiled. The same almost smile from Henderson's clinic, just the corner of his mouth just for a second. Yes, ma'am, I am. Well, come in and sit down. Don't stand there like a stranger. Any friend of Ethan's is welcome in my room. Silas Maddox, the man feared by thousands, the man who controlled a chapter of the most notorious motorcycle club in America, walked into that small room and sat in the plastic visitor's chair next to Martha Walker's recliner. What's your name? Martha asked. Silas, ma'am. That's a good Bible name. Are you a Bible man, Silas? I used to be. Used to be is better than never was. Martha patted his hand. Ethan, get your friend some tea. Ethan looked at Silas. Silas looked at Ethan. And for the first time in 4 days, both of them felt something other than tension and fear and the weight of a world that had spun out of control. They felt the quiet, unshakable peace of a 78-year-old woman who didn't know what the Hells Angels were, didn't know what had happened in the woods, didn't know that her grandson had become the most talked about person in the state of Tennessee. She just knew her boy was here, and he'd brought a friend, and the friend needed tea. While Ethan went to the small kitchen at the end of the hall, Silas sat with Martha. She told him about the game show she was watching. She told him about the nurse who always brought her extra pudding. She told him that her grandson was a good boy who worked too hard and didn't eat enough. "He's more than a good boy, ma'am," Silas said quietly. "He's the best person I've ever met." Martha studied him with those clear-cutting eyes. The same eyes Victoria had described, the ones that could see through everything. "You're in some kind of trouble," Martha said. It wasn't a question. "Not me, people around me." And Ethan got himself mixed up in it. Silas looked at her directly. "Your grandson saved someone very important to me. And because of that, some bad people might try to use you to get to him." Martha didn't flinch. She didn't gasp. She didn't look scared. She looked at Silas Maddox with 78 years of Tennessee steel in her spine and said, "Then you'd better make sure they don't." "That's exactly what I'm here to do." "Good." She picked up her tea and took a sip. "Now tell me about this person Ethan saved. Were they worth it?" "She's my wife." Martha set the tea down slowly. She looked at Silas, really looked at him, and Ethan, returning with a second cup, saw something pass between them. An understanding, a recognition between two people who knew what it meant to love someone so deeply that losing them would end the world. "Then he did right," Martha said. "He always does right, even when it costs him." "I know he does, and I'm going to make sure it doesn't cost him anything else." Martha reached over and patted Silas's hand again. "You seem like a man who keeps his promises." "I am, ma'am." "Then keep this one." Silas's phone buzzed. He checked the message and his expression hardened. He stood up, leaned down, and took Martha's hand gently. "It was a pleasure meeting you, Mrs. Walker. I'll be back. Bring me some of those biscuits from Margaret's Diner when you come. Ethan always forgets." "Yes, ma'am." Silas walked into the hallway and Ethan followed. The warmth of the room evaporated the moment Silas showed him his phone. A message from Cutter security footage pulled. "Man matching Declan Price entered the facility yesterday at 2:15. Signed in as David Reynolds. Spent 11 minutes in the East Wing. He didn't enter Martha's room, but he walked the hallway twice. He was mapping the building." Ethan read the message twice. The second time his hands were shaking. "I was here," Ethan said. "He was in this building, 20 feet from her room. And now he'll never get within 20 miles of her again." Silas put his phone away. "I'm leaving 4 men here, around the clock. They'll blend in, no vests, no bikes. Just men in plain clothes who happen to be in the parking lot, in the lobby, and the hallway. Nobody gets near her. And Brennan, the man behind all of this." Silas's eyes went dark. Not angry dark, calm dark. The kind of calm that sits at the center of a hurricane. "Brennan made a mistake, Ethan. He went after my wife and failed. Then he threatened an old woman in a nursing home. Every move he's made since that night in the woods has shown me exactly who he is and exactly where his limits are." "And where are they?" "He doesn't have any." Silas's voice dropped. "And now, neither do I." He turned and walked toward the exit, pulling his phone out, already dialing, already moving, already becoming the man the world feared. Ethan stood alone in the hallway of Sunset Acres, listening to the motorcycle start up outside, listening to the game show playing in his grandmother's room, listening to his own heart beating in a chest that felt too small to hold everything he was feeling. Fear, rage, love, gratitude, and something else. Something that had been growing since the moment he knelt beside Victoria in the dirt. Purpose. He didn't choose this. He didn't want this. But it was his now. The boy who heard a scream in the woods had walked into a war, and the war had followed him home. And now the only person in the world who still remembered to ask if he'd eaten breakfast was 20 feet from a man who wanted to use her as a weapon. Ethan walked back into room 114. Martha was watching her game show again, sipping her tea, perfectly calm. "Grandma, I love you." She looked at him and smiled. "I know you do, sweetheart. Now sit down and watch this with me. This contestant is about to lose everything because he got greedy." Ethan sat down. He watched the screen without seeing it. And behind the glass doors of Sunset Acres, 4 men in plain clothes took their positions, and the perimeter closed around Martha Walker like a fist. 3 days passed without incident, and that silence was the worst part. Ethan went back to work at Ray's shop because sitting at home staring at his phone was driving him insane. He changed brake pads. He rotated tires. He replaced a water pump on a Honda Civic that belonged to the pastor's wife. Normal work, ordinary work. The kind of work that used to make him feel grounded. But nothing felt grounded anymore. Every time a car pulled into the lot, he looked up. Every time his phone buzzed, his chest tightened. Every time the shop door opened, his hands stopped moving until he saw a familiar face. Ray noticed. Of course, Ray noticed. "You can't live like this," Ray said on the third afternoon, leaning against the workbench while Ethan stared at a carburetor he'd been holding for 2 full minutes without doing anything to it. "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You haven't been fine since that phone call from Silas. You're jumping at shadows." "I'm not jumping at shadows. I'm being careful." There's a difference between careful and paralyzed, Ethan. And right now, you're closer to paralyzed. Ethan set the carburetor down harder than he intended. "A man walked through my grandmother's nursing home 3 days ago, Ray. He walked the hallway outside her room. He was measuring the building. He was planning something. So yeah, maybe I'm a little on edge." Ray held up both hands. "I'm not criticizing you. I'm worried about you. There's a difference." "I know. I'm sorry." "Don't apologize. Just talk to me. What's going on in your head?" Ethan pulled a rag off the bench and wiped his hands, slowly buying time. "I keep thinking about what Victoria said, that these people don't have rules, that they have objectives. And their objective right now is to prove that what I did was a mistake, that helping someone gets you hurt. And what do you think? I think they might be right." Ray stepped forward. Don't you dare say that." "I'm not saying I regret it. I'd do it again. I'd do it 100 times. But I brought this into other people's lives. Your life, Doc Henderson's life, Grandma's life. None of you asked for this." "Neither did you." "Yeah, but I made the choice. The rest of you are just caught in the blast." Ray grabbed Ethan's shoulder and turned him so they were face to face. "Listen to me. Your grandmother raised you to be the kind of person who doesn't walk away. She didn't raise you to carry the guilt of other people's evil. The men who attacked Victoria, they made choices. The man who walked through that nursing home, he made a choice. Those are their sins, Ethan, not yours." Ethan's eyes burned. He blinked hard and looked away. "Now get back to work," Ray said, releasing his shoulder. "And fix that carburetor before Mrs. Patterson calls me again." Ethan almost laughed. Almost. That evening, Silas called. "I need you at the community center tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock. "What's happening at the community center?" "We're finishing the renovation. Donna organized a community event. Families, townspeople, our people. It's supposed to be a gesture, the club giving back to the town that helped Victoria." "That sounds like a public gathering." "It is. And you think that's safe?" "I think it's necessary. Brennan wants this town to be afraid. He wants the people here to blame you and blame us for bringing danger to their doorstep. The best way to fight that is to show them that we're not hiding, that we're building, not destroying. And if Brennan's people show up, then they'll find 280 armed men between them and everyone they want to hurt." Silas paused. "Ethan, I need you there. You're the reason any of this is happening. These people need to see you standing with us, not hiding in a garage." Ethan was quiet for a long moment. 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock. He hung up and sat on the edge of his bed. He thought about calling his grandmother, but she'd be asleep by now. He thought about calling Victoria, but Henderson had told him she was resting and shouldn't be disturbed. He thought about calling somebody, anybody, because the silence in his rented house was pressing against him like water against a dam. "I didn't call anyone." He set his alarm for 6:30 and lay down in the dark and stared at the ceiling until exhaustion finally pulled him under. The community center in Silver Creek was a squat brick building that hadn't been updated since 1987. The paint was peeling, the parking lot was cracked, and the front steps had a wobble that Frank Jessup had been complaining about at town council meetings for the last 5 years. When Ethan pulled up at 7:45 the next morning, he barely recognized the place. The entire exterior had been repainted. The parking lot was resurfaced. The front steps were rebuilt with fresh lumber. A hand-painted banner hung across the entrance that read, "Silver Creek Community Day, all welcome." Donna Cole met him at the door. "You're early. Good. Come inside." The interior had been transformed. Tables were set up with food donated by the diner, the bakery, in a barbecue truck that one of the club members had driven up from Memphis. Folding chairs were arranged in rows facing a small stage at the front. Children were already running between the tables, chasing each other, while their parents tried to corral them. And everywhere, there were bikers. But they didn't look like the fearsome figures Ethan had expected. They looked like people at a church picnic. Some were carrying plates of food. Some were inflating balloons. One enormous man with a beard down to his chest was kneeling on the floor helping a 5-year-old girl tie her shoelaces. Victoria was there. She was in a wheelchair, her leg in a proper cast now, courtesy of the orthopedic surgeon Silas had brought in 2 days ago. She looked better, stronger. The color was back in her face, and when she saw Ethan, she smiled in a way that made the whole room feel warmer. "Get over here," she said. Ethan knelt beside her wheelchair. "You look good." "I look like a woman who got hit by a truck and then spent a week in a retired doctor's office. But thank you for lying." She squeezed his arm. "How are you holding up?" "I'm okay." "Liar." "Yeah, total liar." She laughed softly. "Silas told me about the nursing home, about the text. I'm sorry, Ethan, I'm sorry this reached your grandmother." "It didn't reach her. She's safe." Silas made sure of that. "Silas will always make sure of that. But I want you to know something." She leaned closer. "This ends today. One way or another. Silas has been working with the TBI and the sheriff. They've identified Brennan's men, all 3 who attacked me and the one who went to the nursing home. The warrants are being issued this morning." Ethan's heart rate spiked. "This morning, right now." "Silas wanted to tell you himself, but I couldn't wait. They're being arrested, Ethan, by law enforcement, through proper channels, the way Silas promised the sheriff. And Brennan, the man giving the orders." Victoria's expression shifted. "Brennan is a different matter. He's careful. He doesn't leave fingerprints. The TBI needs more time to build a case against him. More time means more danger. More time means more rope for him to hang himself with. Silas is patient, Ethan, more patient than anyone gives him credit for." Ethan wanted to believe her. He wanted to believe that this nightmare had an expiration date, that the law would do its job, that Brennan would face justice through the system. But something in the back of his mind wouldn't let go. A feeling, a vibration, the same instinct that had told him not to call out in the woods when he was looking for Victoria. Something was wrong and he couldn't see it yet. The event started at 10. By 11, over 400 people filled the community center and the parking lot outside. Families from Silver Creek mixed with bikers from 6 states. Children sat on the shoulders of tattooed men. Elderly women from the church served lemonade to club members who called them ma'am and said thank you. Sheriff Hobbs walked through the crowd with a look of stunned disbelief on his face. He stopped beside Ray, who was manning the barbecue truck. "This is not what I expected," Hobbs said. "What did you expect?" "Honestly, chaos, violence, property damage. Instead, I've got bikers painting my community center and a 6'5" man named Brutus teaching kids how to make friendship bracelets. His name is Brutus. That's what his vest says." Ray flipped a burger and grinned. "Welcome to the new Silver Creek Dale." At noon, Silas took the small stage. The room went quiet. "I'm not going to make a long speech," he said. "That's not my style. But I want to say something to this town, and to one person in particular." He looked directly at Ethan, who was standing near the back with his arms crossed, trying to be invisible. "A week ago, my wife was attacked and left for dead. A young man from this town, a man with no obligation, no connection, no reason to risk his life, stopped. His truck walked into those woods and saved her. He carried her out. He found her a doctor. He kept her alive." The room was absolutely still. "I have been in this life for over 30 years. I have seen loyalty and I have seen betrayal. I have seen men fight for their brothers, and I have seen men run from their own shadows. But I have never seen what this young man did. He had nothing to gain. He had everything to lose. And he did it anyway." Silas reached into his vest and pulled out the honorary vest he had shown Ethan at the shop. He held it up so the room could see it. "Ethan Walker, come up here." Every head turned. 400 pairs of eyes locked onto Ethan. He felt the heat rise in his face. His feet didn't want to move. His body didn't want to be on display. But Victoria was watching from her wheelchair, and she nodded, just once, the same way Silas nodded, and somehow that was enough. Ethan walked through the crowd. People parted for him. Hands reached out to touch his shoulder, his arm, his back. He felt them like electric pulses, tiny currents of gratitude and admiration flowing through strangers who'd heard the story and believed it. He stepped onto the stage. Silas held the vest open. This is not a membership. It's not recruitment. It's recognition. It says that you stood up when it mattered, and that every man and woman who wears our patch honors you for it. Ethan looked at the vest. He looked at the crowd. He looked at Victoria. He looked at Ray, who was standing by the barbecue truck with tears running into his beard. He took the vest and held it against his chest. The room erupted, not cheering exactly, something deeper, a roar that came from the collective relief of hundreds of people who had spent a week in fear and tension and uncertainty, and who now for the first time felt something that resembled hope. Then Ethan heard it, a sound underneath the applause, a sound that didn't belong, a phone ringing, not his, not anyone's in the crowd, coming from outside where two of Silas's men were stationed at the parking lot entrance. Then shouting, not celebratory shouting, warning shouting. Then Victoria's voice sharp as a knife through the noise. Silas, everything happened in the next 90 seconds. The back door of the community center slammed open. 3 men came through it. They weren't wearing vests or patches. They were wearing plain clothes ball caps, faces hard and focused. 2 carried metal pipes. The third carried something Ethan couldn't identify at first, a black cylinder short with a handle, a flare gun. Victoria saw it before anyone else. 22 years married to the president of a motorcycle club had taught her to read violence the way a meteorologist reads storm fronts. Get the children down, she screamed from her wheelchair. Now get them down. The room shattered into chaos. Parents grabbed their kids. Chairs toppled. Tables were shoved aside. The sound of 400 people reacting to sudden danger was deafening, a roar of panic and confusion that filled the building like a physical force. But the bikers didn't panic. They moved. It was the most coordinated thing Ethan had ever seen. Without a word, without a signal, without a single shouted command, 280 Hells Angels members reorganized themselves into a living barrier between the attackers and the civilians. They didn't charge. They didn't attack. They shielded. Silas was off the stage in a heartbeat, shoving Ethan behind him with one arm while advancing toward the 3 men with the other. Donna, Silas barked, west exit, families now. Donna Cole grabbed Victoria's wheelchair and pushed her toward the side doors, shouting at people to follow. A stream of families, mothers carrying babies, fathers pulling children by the hand, elderly couples clutching each other, flooded toward the exit while a wall of leather-clad men held the line. The man with the flare gun raised it toward the ceiling. Everybody stays, he shouted. Nobody leaves. This is a message. Silas stopped 10 feet from him. You've got 3 seconds to put that down. From Brennan, the man continued, ignoring Silas. He wants you to know that this isn't over. He wants the town to know that siding with you has consequences. And he wants the kid to know 2 seconds. The man swung the flare gun toward Silas. You think I'm afraid of you? 1, the man's finger tightened on the trigger, and Ethan stepped out from behind Silas. I didn't think about it. He didn't plan it. He just moved. The same way he'd moved when he heard the scream in the woods. The same reflex. The same instinct that his grandmother had planted in him so deep it was indistinguishable from breathing. He stepped directly into the space between Silas and the gunman. Don't, Ethan said. The man with the flare gun stared at him. Get out of the way, kid. No, I will shoot you. Maybe, but there are 400 people in this building, and half of them are children. And if you fire that thing in here, you're not sending a message. You're hurting kids. Is that what Brennan wants? Is that his message? That he hurts children. Children, the man's hand wavered. Not much, just a tremor. But it was there. You don't know anything about. I know that you walked into a room full of families and you pulled a weapon. I know that there are 80 kids in this building right now who are terrified because of you. And I know that every person in this room is going to remember what you do in the next 5 seconds for the rest of their lives. The building was silent, 400 people holding their breath, 280 bikers holding their positions, 3 attackers standing in the back doorway of a community center in a town they'd never heard of 2 weeks ago, and one 20-year-old mechanic standing in the middle of all of it, unarmed, unprotected, looking a man with a weapon in the eye and refusing to move. The man with the flare gun glanced at his 2 companions. One of them had already lowered his pipe. The other was backing toward the door. This isn't worth it, the one with the lowered pipe muttered. Look at this place. It's a family event. There are cameras. There are cops outside. Let's go. Brennan said, Brennan isn't here. We are. And I'm not going to prison for shooting a flare at a bunch of kids. The man with the flare gun looked at Ethan one final time. His jaw worked like he was chewing on words he wanted to say but couldn't find. His arm dropped to his side. Then he turned and walked out the back door. His companions followed. They were gone. The silence lasted another 5 seconds. Then someone in the crowd started crying. Then someone else. Then the sound of relief sobbing, nervous laughter voices, calling out names to make sure everyone was accounted for washed through the building like a wave. Silas grabbed Ethan by the shoulders and spun him around. His face was a storm of emotions, fury, disbelief, admiration, and something that looked uncomfortably like fear. Don't you ever do that again, Silas said. Don't you ever step in front of a weapon for me. Do you understand? I wasn't stepping in front of a weapon for you. I was stepping in front of a weapon for the 80 kids behind us. Silas's grip tightened. Then it loosened. Then he pulled Ethan into a hug so fierce it drove the air from Ethan's lungs. You impossible kid, Silas said into Ethan's shoulder. You impossible, stubborn, reckless kid. Victoria was at the side exit, still in her wheelchair, tears streaming down her face. Donna was beside her, one hand on Victoria's shoulder, the other pressing a phone to her ear, calling 911. Sheriff Hobbs burst through the front entrance with 2 deputies. What happened? Is anyone hurt? Nobody's hurt, Silas said, releasing Ethan. 3 men came through the back. They're gone, heading east on foot. One has a flare gun. The other 2 had pipes. They work for Royce Brennan. Descriptions. Silas rattled off details with military precision, height-build clothing, distinguishing marks. Hobbs relayed the information to his deputies who sprinted for their cruisers. Ethan stood in the middle of the community center, surrounded by overturned chairs and scattered plates of food and the lingering echo of 400 held breaths. The honorary vest was still pressed against his chest. He hadn't dropped it. Through all of it, the shouting, the confrontation, the moment he'd stepped between a weapon and the man who'd sworn to protect him, he hadn't let go. Ray appeared beside him. His uncle's face was pale, his hands were shaking, and his eyes were red. Don't say it, Ethan said quietly. Don't say what? Whatever you're about to say, I already know. Ray put his arm around Ethan's shoulders and held him there the way he used to hold him when Ethan was a little boy waking up from nightmares about the car accident that took his parents. I was going to say your grandmother is right, Ray whispered. You're exactly like your mother. Around them, the bikers were already setting the room back in order. Chairs were being righted. Tables were being fixed. Food was being replaced. Children who had been crying minutes ago were being lifted onto shoulders and distracted with balloon animals and promises of ice cream. And outside in the parking lot, the sound of police sirens mixed with the low rumble of motorcycle engines as every rider in Silver Creek prepared for what they all knew was coming. Brennan had sent his men. His men had failed, and a 20-year-old boy had stood in the gap one more time. The war wasn't over, but the battle had shifted, because Brennan's greatest weapon fear had just been neutralized by the one thing he never accounted for: a kid who wouldn't move. Part 5, the legacy of the boy who didn't run. The 3 men were caught within the hour. Sheriff Hobbs's deputies found them on foot 2 miles east of Silver Creek, trying to reach a vehicle stashed behind an abandoned gas station. The man with the flare gun, later identified as Kenny Marsh, threw the weapon into a ditch. When the cruiser lights hit him, the other 2 dropped their pipes and surrendered without resistance. Hobbs cuffed Marsh personally. He read him his rights. Then he leaned in close and said something that wasn't part of any procedure. You walked into a room full of children holding a weapon. I'm going to make sure you remember that decision every single day for the next 20 years. Marsh said nothing. He stared at the floorboard of the cruiser with the hollow look of a man who understood that the people he worked for would not be sending lawyers. By nightfall, all 3 were in county lockup. The TBI confirmed that the warrants for Victoria's original attackers had been executed simultaneously, 2 arrested in Knoxville, 1 in Chattanooga. 5 men connected to Royce Brennan were behind bars in a single day. But Brennan himself was still free. Ethan learned this from Victoria, who called him at 9 that night. Her voice was steady, but he could hear something fraying at the edges. The TBI says they need more time. Brennan doesn't leave fingerprints. He uses intermediaries. They're building a RICO case, but it could take weeks. Weeks, Ethan said. He was sitting on the edge of his bed, still wearing the clothes from the community center. He hadn't changed. He hadn't eaten. He was running on adrenaline and something darker that he didn't have a name for yet. Silas is handling things on his end. He doesn't tell me the details anymore. What do you think he's doing? Victoria paused. I think he's being patient, really patient. Not the kind of patience that's waiting for the right moment to hurt someone. The kind that means he's actually considering letting the system work. Because of the promise he made to Hobbs. Because of you, Ethan. Me. You stood in front of a weapon today and you didn't use violence. You used words. And it worked. My husband has been solving problems with force for 30 years, and today he watched a 20-year-old mechanic do something he's never been able to do. You changed the outcome without breaking anyone. I didn't change anything, I just stood there. That's exactly what changed everything. Ethan closed his eyes. He wanted to believe her. He wanted to believe that standing still and speaking truth could actually stop the kind of men who left women bleeding in the woods and walked through nursing homes planning harm. But in the quiet of his empty house, with the adrenaline finally draining and the reality settling in like cold water, he wasn't sure he believed anything at all. Victoria. Yes. Does it get easier? The fear. She was quiet for so long that Ethan thought she might have hung up. Then softly, no, it doesn't get easier, but you get stronger. And there's a difference. What's the difference? Easy means the fear goes away. Stronger means the fear stays and you keep going anyway. You already know how to do that, Ethan. You've been doing it since the moment you heard me screaming. He thanked her and hung up. He sat in the dark for a long time. Then he took out his phone and typed a text to Uncle Ray. I'm okay, going to bed. See you at the shop tomorrow. Ray's reply came in 4 seconds. Proud of you, kid. Lock your doors. Ethan locked his doors. He lay down. And for the first time in 10 days, he slept without dreaming. The next morning brought something Ethan didn't expect. I was at the shop by 7:15, same as always. He had a transmission rebuild scheduled for a regular customer's Dodge Ram, and he was looking forward to the mindless, mechanical work, the kind of task that let his hands move while his brain rested. He was 30 minutes into the job when Ray walked into the garage holding a newspaper. You need to see this. The Knoxville Journal had run the story above the fold. The headline read, "Small Town Mechanic Saves Biker's Wife, Then Faces Down Attackers at Community Event." Below it was a photograph someone had taken with a phone, Ethan standing between Silas and the man with the flare gun, his hands empty, his body positioned between the weapon and the crowd. Ethan stared at the photograph. He barely recognized himself. The person in that image looked calm, composed, certain. The person holding the newspaper had grease on his fingers and circles under his eyes and a knot in his stomach that hadn't loosened in 10 days. There's more, Ray said. He turned the page. A second article, smaller, ran beneath the first. The headline on that one hit Ethan like a punch. Hells Angels President Silas Maddox issues rare public statement. This young man changed how I see the world. Ethan read the article twice. Silas had spoken to a reporter, something he had reportedly never done in 30 years of club leadership. The statement was short, direct, and carried the weight of a man choosing every word with precision. For most of my life, I believed that strength meant being feared. I built my reputation on that belief. I led my chapter on that belief. And then a 20-year-old kid from a repair shop showed me I was wrong. Strength is not about fear. Strength is about protecting people who cannot protect themselves. Ethan Walker didn't have a weapon. He didn't have backup. He didn't have a reason. He just had a conscience. And that conscience was more powerful than anything I've seen in 3 decades. Ethan set the newspaper down. You okay? Ray asked. The president of the Hells Angels just told a newspaper that I changed how he sees the world. Yeah, I fix transmissions, Ray. I know. I eat canned soup for dinner 3 nights a week. I know that too. Ethan looked at his uncle. What am I supposed to do with this? Ray took the newspaper back and folded it carefully. You don't have to do anything with it. This isn't about what you do next. This is about what you already did. You don't owe the world a follow-up. But the world wasn't finished with Ethan Walker. By noon, his phone had 17 missed calls from numbers he didn't recognize. Ray's shop phone had 12. Margaret at the diner said 3 different reporters had come in asking questions. The pastor called to say a television crew from Nashville was parked outside the church asking for an interview. Ethan didn't return any of the calls. He didn't agree to any interviews. He finished the transmission rebuild, cleaned his tools, and drove to Sunset Acres to see his grandmother. The four men Arces had stationed at the nursing home were still there. One of them, a quiet, muscular man named Pete, who looked like he could bench press a small car, met Ethan in the lobby. "Everything's been cleaned," Pete said. "No unusual visitors, no suspicious vehicles. Your grandmother had a good day. The nurse said she ate all her lunch." "Thank you, Pete." "Don't thank me, thank Silas." Ethan walked to room 114. Martha was in her recliner, and today was a good day. He could tell immediately because she looked at him when he walked in and said his name without hesitation. "Ethan, 2 visits in 1 week. Are you in trouble?" He sat down beside her and took her hand. "No, ma'am, just missed you." "You're lying. You always pull your ear when you're lying. You've done it since you were 4. Ethan dropped his hand from his ear. He hadn't even realized he'd been touching it. "Something happened," Martha said. Not a question. "A lot of things happened, Grandma." "Tell me." So he told her. Not everything, not the violence, not the threats, not the man who'd walked her hallway mapping the building. But the heart of it, the woman in the woods, the decision to stay, the bikers who came to honor him, the vest, the community event, the moment he'd stepped between a weapon and a crowd of families. Martha listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. Her thumb traced small circles on the back of his hand, the way she used to do when he was little and couldn't sleep. "You did right," she said finally. "I know. But that's not what's bothering you." "No, what's bothering you?" Ethan leaned forward. "I'm scared, Grandma. Not of the men who did this, not of what might happen next. I'm scared of who I'm becoming. Everything is changing so fast. People are calling me a hero. Newspapers are writing about me. A man I met 10 days ago is telling the world I changed his life. And I'm just Ethan. I fix cars. That's who I am." Martha squeezed his hand with a strength that surprised him. "Listen to me. You are not becoming someone different. You are becoming more of who you've always been. The world just noticed, that's all. The world is slow, Ethan. It takes the world a long time to see what's right in front of it. What if I can't live up to what people expect? People's expectations are their problem. Your job is the same as it's always been. Help when you can. Stay when others leave. And don't ever let fear tell you who you are." She leaned closer. Her eyes were sharp today, focused, present, the eyes of the woman who'd raised him, who'd sewn dresses until her fingers bled, who'd cleaned houses and sold pies, and sat beside his bed every night for 14 years, repeating the same lesson until it became the core of who he was. "I taught you one thing," Martha said, "one thing, and you learned it. That's enough. That will always be enough." Ethan pressed his forehead to her hand. He stayed there for a long time, breathing in the smell of her lavender lotion and the clean cotton of her blanket, and he let himself feel small again. Not weak, not helpless, just small. A boy in the presence of the woman who'd built him, reminding himself of the foundation before the world tried to stack too much on top of it. When he left Sunset Acres, Pete was waiting by the door. "Silas wants to see you tonight, at your uncle's shop, 7 o'clock. "Did he say why?" "He never says why." Ethan arrived at the shop at 6:45. Ray was already there, and so was Henderson. The old doctor was sitting in Ray's office chair, drinking coffee from a chipped mug, looking like a man who'd aged 5 years in 2 weeks. "Doc, what are you doing here?" "Silas asked me to come. I assume it's about Victoria. Her follow-up is tomorrow, and I want to discuss her imaging results." "How is she healing?" "Faster than I expected, honestly. That woman has the constitution of a mule and the stubbornness to match." At 7 sharp, Silas arrived. Not with 30 riders this time, not with an entourage. Just him, Donna Cole, and one other man. Ethan hadn't met a lean, gray-haired figure with reading glasses, pushed up on his forehead, in a leather briefcase that looked entirely out of place with his biker vest. "This is Arthur Webb," Silas said. "He's our attorney." Ethan glanced at Ray. Ray shrugged slightly. Silas sat down and looked at everyone in the room, one at a time, the way he always did, reading faces, measuring temperatures, calculating angles. Then he spoke. "Brennan is done." The room went still. "The TBI executed a search warrant on his property this afternoon. They found enough to bury him communications, linking him to the attack on Victoria Financial Records, tying him to Marsh and the other 3, and a weapons cache that violates about 14 federal statutes." He was arrested at 4:15 this afternoon at a gas station in Murfreesboro. He's in federal custody. Nobody spoke for a full 5 seconds. Henderson broke the silence. Thank God. It wasn't God, Silas said. It was Hobbs. That sheriff did exactly what he promised. He worked the case, he coordinated with the TBI, and he nailed Brennan through the system. No shortcuts, no backroom deals, clean. Silas looked at Ethan. The way you would have wanted it. Ethan felt something release inside his chest. Something he'd been carrying for 10 days, a weight, a pressure, a constant low-frequency hum of dread, suddenly lifted, and the absence of it was so profound that his vision blurred. It's over, he asked. The threat is over. Brennan's organization is dismantled. The men who attacked Victoria will stand trial. Marsh and his crew are facing federal charges for the community center. Silas paused. But I didn't come here just to tell you that. He nodded to Arthur Webb. The attorney opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder. Mr. Walker, my name is Arthur Webb, and I've been the legal counsel for the Tennessee chapter for 11 years. At Mr. Maddox's request, I've established a trust, an education trust in your name, fully funded. It will cover tuition, books, housing, and living expenses at any accredited university or trade school in the United States for as long as you want to study. Ethan's mouth opened. Nothing came out. There's no obligation attached to this, Webb continued. No membership requirement, no expectation. It's a gift, Mr. Walker, from the Maddox family in the Tennessee chapter. Ethan looked at Silas. I can't accept this. You can and you will. Silas, I didn't do any of this for money or... I know you didn't. That's exactly why you're getting it. Silas leaned forward. Ethan, you are 20 years old. You are the smartest, bravest, most stubborn person I have ever met. And you are wasting your potential rebuilding transmissions in your uncle's shop. Hey, Ray said. No offense, Ray. You've done a hell of a job with him. But this kid could be anything. A doctor, an engineer, a teacher, whatever he wants. And the only thing standing between him and that is money. So I'm removing that obstacle. Ethan looked at the folder in Webb's hands. He looked at his uncle. Ray's eyes were red and his jaw was working, but he nodded. Take it, Ray said. For God's sake, Ethan, take it. Henderson cleared his throat. If I may offer a professional opinion, you'd make a damn fine doctor. You've got steady hands, a cool head under pressure, and you don't pass out at the sight of blood. That puts you ahead of half my med school class. Ethan almost laughed. The sound came out strangled, halfway between a laugh and something else entirely. I need to think about it, he said. Take all the time you need, Silas said. The money's not going anywhere. Webb handed Ethan the folder. Ethan held it the same way he'd held the honorary vest pressed against his chest, like something precious and terrifying and utterly unexpected. Silas stood up. One more thing, and this is why I really came. He reached into his vest pocket and pulled out an envelope. He held it out to Ethan. Victoria wrote this. She asked me to give it to you personally. Ethan took the envelope. His name was written on the front in careful, elegant handwriting. He turned it over but didn't open it. She wanted you to read it alone, Silas said. When you're ready. Silas shook Ethan's hand. He shook Ray's hand. He shook Henderson's hand. Then he turned to leave and Ethan called after him. Silas. The big man stopped in the doorway. Thank you for everything, for protecting my grandmother, for the trust, for keeping your promise to do this the right way. Silas turned around, and for the first time, not the corner of his mouth, not a suppressed twitch. He smiled, a full, genuine, unguarded smile that transformed his entire face and revealed for just a moment the man underneath the president. You don't thank me, Ethan. I thank you. You gave me something I didn't know I was missing. What? Proof that the world still makes people like you. He walked out. Donna followed. Webb followed. The door closed and Ethan was left standing in his uncle's shop with a folder full of legal documents and an unopened letter, and a feeling in his chest that he couldn't name because he'd never felt it before. Henderson stood up and put on his coat. I'm going home. I'm going to have a drink, and then I'm going to sleep for 14 hours. Ethan, if you decide on medical school, you call me. I know people. Thank you, Doc. Thank your grandmother. She made you. The rest of us just got lucky enough to watch. Henderson left. Ray and Ethan stood alone in the shop. You going to open that letter? Ray asked. Not yet. Okay, you want to come to my place for dinner? I've got leftover chili. Yeah, I'd like that. They locked up the shop and drove to Ray's house. They ate chili and watched a football game on television and didn't talk about bikers or weapons or nursing homes or trust funds. They talked about the Dodge Ram transmission. They talked about Mrs. Calloway's car, which would probably need fixing again by next week. They talked about whether Ray should hire a second mechanic because the shop was getting busier. Normal things, ordinary things, the kind of things Ethan used to think were boring but now understood were the entire point. At 10 o'clock, Ethan drove home. He sat at his kitchen table. He opened Victoria's letter. Dear Ethan, I've started this letter 6 times and thrown it away 5. I'm not good with words on paper. Silas is the one who reads books. I'm the one who makes coffee and tells him to come to bed. But some things need to be written down because spoken words disappear, and I don't want this to disappear. 10 days ago, I was lying on the ground in the woods, and I was dying. I knew it. I could feel it. Not the pain I can handle. I could feel the loneliness, the absolute certainty that nobody was coming, that I was going to die alone in the dirt, and the last thing I'd see would be the sky through the trees. And then you came. I told you to run. I meant it. I wanted you to leave because I was terrified that my world, this world I chose 30 years ago, would swallow you up and destroy you the way it almost destroyed me. But you knelt in the dirt and you said your name and you tore your shirt into bandages and you carried me out of those woods. And the whole time I kept waiting for you to change your mind. I kept waiting for you to realize who I was and what I represented and decide it wasn't worth it. You never did. Ethan, I have lived inside a world of power and fear for 22 years. I have watched men prove their strength by hurting other men. I have watched loyalty measured by willingness to do violence. I have watched courage defined as the ability to inflict damage without flinching. And then I met you, and I learned that the bravest thing a person can do is not fight. The bravest thing a person can do is stay. Stay when it's dangerous. Stay when it's foolish. Stay when everyone else would run. Stay and help and ask nothing in return. You changed my husband. I don't know if you understand how significant that is. Silas Maddox has been the same man for 30 years. Same code, same rules. Same belief that the world only respects strength and strength only comes from fear. You cracked that belief open in 10 days. You showed him that a kid with no weapon and no armor and no reason to be brave could walk into the worst situations and change them through pure, stubborn, ridiculous kindness. He cried last night. Silas Maddox, the man who hasn't cried since his mother's funeral in 1994, sat on the edge of our bed and cried. He said, Vic, I've been doing it wrong, all of it, the whole time. And I held him and I told him what I'm telling you now, you didn't just save my life in those woods. You saved his too. I don't know what you'll do with the trust. I don't know if you'll go to college or stay at the shop or something else entirely. It doesn't matter. Whatever you choose will be right because you are a person who makes right choices. Not perfect choices, right ones. There's a difference. Your grandmother taught you well. I hope someday I get to meet her and thank her for making the person who saved me. With all my love and all my gratitude, Victoria Maddox. P.S. Silas wants you to know that you are welcome at our table anytime. He also wants you to know that he has never in his life said this to anyone outside the club. So please don't make him regret it by showing up without an appetite. I cook a lot. Ethan read the letter 3 times. The 3rd time his vision was too blurred to read the words, but it didn't matter. He knew them by heart already. He sat at his kitchen table for a long time. The house was quiet. The town was quiet. For the first time in 10 days, Silver Creek felt like Silver Creek again. He picked up his phone and called Victoria. She answered on the first ring. You read it. I read it. And I don't know what to say. Then don't say anything. Just tell me you're okay. I'm okay. I'm really okay. Good. She paused. There's one more thing I didn't put in the letter because I wanted to say it out loud. What you asked me once in Henderson's clinic, whether it gets easier, the fear. I told you it doesn't get easier, you just get stronger. I remember. I was wrong, it does get easier. It gets easier when you realize you're not alone. And you're not alone, Ethan. Not anymore. Not ever again. Ethan closed his eyes. Thank you, Victoria. Thank you, Ethan. Good night. Good night. He hung up. He folded the letter carefully and put it in the drawer of his nightstand next to the only photograph he had of his parents. A faded Polaroid of a young couple standing in front of a white house laughing at something off camera, their faces bright with a happiness they didn't know would end too soon. He looked at the photograph for a long time, at his mother's face, at the way she was leaning toward his father, her hand on his arm, her head tilted back in laughter. "I think you'd understand," he said quietly. "I think you'd understand all of it." Then he turned off the light and went to bed. 2 weeks later, Ethan Walker enrolled in the pre-medical program at the University of Tennessee. He told Ray first. His uncle hugged him so hard that Ethan heard something pop in his back, and then Ray held him at arm's length and looked at him with an expression that was equal parts pride and grief. The pride of watching someone you raised become more than you imagined, and the grief of knowing they were leaving. "Your grandmother is going to be impossible when she hears this," Ray said, wiping his eyes. "She's going to tell everyone in that nursing home, the nurses, the doctors, the janitor, the delivery guy, everyone. I know. She's going to say, 'That's my grandson. He's going to be a doctor. I taught him everything he knows.'" And she'd be right. Ray laughed through his tears and pulled Ethan in for another hug. He told Martha on a Sunday, a good Sunday, a clear-eyed, present, sharp as a tack Sunday where she remembered his name and his birthday and the name of the dog he'd had when he was 7. "Medical school," she said. "You pre-med first, then we'll see. Ethan Andrew Walker, a doctor." She clasped her hands together and pressed them to her lips. "Your mother would be so proud." "I know, Grandma. Your father, too. He always said you were going to surprise everyone." "Did he?" "Every single day. He used to hold you when you were a baby and say, 'This boy is going to do something the world doesn't see coming.' He said it like a prayer." Ethan reached for her hand. "Grandma, there's something else." "What?" "The people who paid for this, the education, the trust, they're the family of the woman I helped. The motorcycle club." Martha studied him. "The big man, Silas." "Yes, ma'am. He kept his promise." "He did." Martha nodded slowly, the way she did when the world confirmed something she'd already decided was true. "Good. A man who keeps his promises to strangers is a man worth knowing, even if he rides a motorcycle." Ethan laughed, a real laugh, the kind of laugh he hadn't felt in weeks, open, clean, weightless. Martha laughed too, and in that small room in a nursing home in Fairview, Tennessee, a grandmother and her grandson sat together and laughed, and the sound of it was the most ordinary, extraordinary thing in the world. He told Silas last, not by phone, in person. He drove to the address Victoria had given him, a property outside of Nashville that Ethan expected to be intimidating, but turned out to be a ranch house with a wraparound porch and a vegetable garden. Victoria met him at the door. She was walking now slowly with a cane, but walking. Her face lit up when she saw him, and she pulled him into a hug that smelled like cinnamon and fresh bread. "He's out back," she said. "Go." Ethan walked through the house. Family photographs lined the hallway. Silas and Victoria's wedding. Their children, 2 sons both grown. A daughter in a graduation gown. A grandchild on a swing. A life. A full, complicated, imperfect, beautiful life. Silas was sitting on the back porch reading. "Pre-med," Ethan said. Silas set the book down. "When do you start?" "January." "Good. That gives you time to help Ray find a replacement mechanic." "Already working on it." Silas studied him the way he always did. Careful, thorough, missing nothing. "You're different." "I don't feel different." "That's how you know it's real. The people who change the most are always the last to notice." Ethan sat down in the chair beside him. For a while, neither of them spoke. The silence between them had changed. It wasn't the heavy silence of the first phone call or the tense silence of the community center. It was the comfortable silence of 2 people who had walked through fire together and come out the other side with something neither expected. Trust. "Silas, yeah. That statement you gave the paper, about strength not being about fear. What about it? Did you mean it?" Silas was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was lower and softer than Ethan had ever heard it. "I have been the president of my chapter for 14 years. In those 14 years, I have made decisions that kept people safe and decisions that hurt people I didn't need to hurt. I justified all of it by telling myself that fear was the price of security. That if people feared us, they'd leave us alone, and leaving us alone was the same as peace." He turned and looked at Ethan directly. "Then you knelt in the dirt next to my wife and showed me what actual peace looks like. It doesn't come from fear. It comes from someone deciding to help when they don't have to. It comes from a boy tearing his shirt to make a bandage for a stranger. It comes from standing in front of a weapon and talking instead of fighting. He paused. I'm 57 years old, Ethan. I have been wrong about the most important thing in my life for 30 years. And a kid from a repair shop taught me the truth in 10 days. I didn't teach you anything. I just did what my grandmother told me to do. Then your grandmother is the wisest person who ever lived. She'd agree with you. Silas laughed, a real laugh, deep and full and completely unexpected. It rolled out of him like something that had been locked away for decades and finally found the key. Victoria appeared in the doorway carrying 2 cups of coffee. She looked at her husband laughing and stopped. Her eyes went wide, then they went soft, then they filled with tears. What? Silas asked, noticing her expression. Nothing, Victoria said, setting the coffee down and wiping her eyes. Nothing, I just haven't heard that sound in a very long time. She kissed the top of Silas's head and went back inside. Silas looked at Ethan. Ethan looked at Silas. And something passed between them that didn't need words, an understanding, a bond, a quiet recognition that 2 men from entirely different worlds had somehow become part of each other's story. You're going to be a great doctor, Silas said. You don't know that. Yeah, I do, because you've already got the only thing that matters. What's that? You can't walk away from someone who's hurting. Everything else they can teach you. That part they can't. Ethan picked up his coffee and drank it. Victoria's coffee was strong, dark, and perfect. Somewhere inside the house a radio was playing. Somewhere down the road a dog was barking. Somewhere in Silver Creek Ray was probably arguing with Mrs. Calloway about her car. Somewhere in Fairview Martha was watching her game show wearing the new slippers Ethan had bought her last Sunday. The world was spinning the way it always had, but for Ethan Walker it spun differently now. Not because he was famous, not because the newspapers called him a hero, not because the Hells Angels honored him, or because a trust fund would send him to college. It spun differently because he finally understood something his grandmother had been trying to tell him for 20 years. The lesson was never about being brave. It was never about being strong. It was never about being a hero. It was about being present, being there, in the moment when someone needs you, not walking past, not looking away, not calculating the risk or measuring the cost or deciding whether it's worth it. Just being there, just staying. That's all courage ever was, a decision to stay. 3 years later, Ethan Walker graduated at the top of his pre-med class. Victoria and Silas sat in the 3rd row. Ray cried through the entire ceremony. Henderson, 83 years old and using a cane himself, now told everyone within earshot that he'd known the boy would be a doctor since the night Ethan carried a bleeding woman into his clinic and demanded he help. Martha wasn't there. She'd passed peacefully in her sleep 7 months earlier on a Tuesday night with Ethan holding her hand. But before she went on the last clear day she ever had, she looked at her grandson and said something he would carry for the rest of his life. You were always going to be this person, Ethan. I didn't make you. I just reminded you. And the boy who walked toward danger, the boy who knelt in the dirt, the boy who tore his shirt for a stranger, the boy who stood between a weapon and a room full of children, the boy who never once walked away, that boy became a man who spent the rest of his life proving something simple and profound and unshakable. Heroes are not always the strongest. They are not always the bravest. They are not always the ones with weapons or armor or power. Sometimes they are simply the ones who hear a scream in the woods and make the only decision that matters. Someone needs help, and I will not leave.